And we are back, and it is time for the ElseViews. This is where we take the things that we are reading, watching, listening to, um, whatever we are doing, and we talk about them. And a funny thing happened this week. I got caught up on my comic books. So I figured, why not talk about two of them from this past week? And they're the big kickoff books for what Marvel is calling the resurrection of in their universe with the Inhumans and the X-Men. And I bought one book. I bought the Inhumans Prime, and then I had read X-Men Prime at first, figuring you know these were going to be ongoings, not one shots leading excuse me, leading up to the series that will be coming out from this. Um, so the first one I'm going to talk about is Inhumans Prime. This one basically is the setup for the for Royals, the new book for Marvel, and it's sort of, I mean, both of these books can really be described as this is the calm after the storm.
The back to basics is kind of what I see it as. The
Yeah.
Royals in particular, one of the things that's been going on with Marvel and the Inhumans is that they introduced what has been referred to by the fan base commonly as the New Humans by dropping the Terrigen mists into the into the Earth's atmosphere, and it's been going around. Now, one of the problems is that it's been any mutants that it's fine. It's been killing them essentially, but it's been causing
it's sterilized them at first, but then there's the thing called Mpox, which just full out kills them in this leprosy explosion or something. And all that.
And so this is, they've been dealing with this, and there was a X-Men versus Inhumans storyline that just finished up right before this, I think. But so we've been seeing an introduction of a whole new generation of Inhuman characters, including Kamala Khan, who's the current Miss Marvel, Moon Girl. There's some other ones, and you see some of the crossover of that to the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV series, where they've done some similar things with it. Not so much the mutant part, but this is the introduction again of the royal family of Inhumans, which is what is pretty much the classic Inhumans, the ones that were introduced in Fantastic Four. The characters like Black Bolt and Medusa and Karnak and all of those, Lockjaw, which is also what we're going to be seeing coming up in an ABC series, which is going to hit the big screen first. They're going to do an Inhumans movie that will be essentially the first two episodes of the new show that will lead into the series being on ABC.
Yeah. No, yeah, definitely. But I mean, and I'm blanking on, and I could probably just click the links and figure out who wrote these things. The X-Men Prime read like a classic, annual sort of deal, because it was written, part of it was written by Ewing, part of it was written by, it was all written by Mark Guggenheim, but then you got art by, there's more. Ewing was in there, Mark Guggenheim. Art was done by Leonard Kirk, Ken Lashley, Ibram Robertson. It was like for all the stories that were gonna come out of this with X-Men Gold and X-Men Blue, and then the Jean Grey book and stuff, Weapon X and all that stuff down the line. It was sort of like them doing this nice little intro thing. These were, in all honesty, these are just two, and they're $5, so there is a little bit of an investment. But these are two like entry points for you, because they do explain some stuff. And it's really interesting to see in the Inhumans book, like, to go back to this, I'm sorry, I'm jumping with both of them. there's a point in the beginning of it where you see Medusa and Black Bolt talking to each other, actually talking, because in the end of, or during Inhumans versus X-Men, I believe uh Emma had taken
Emma
away
Frost.
yeah, Emma Frost. For some reason I had like Watson and the actresses in my head. I couldn't think of what her last name was. She had taken away his powers. So he could actually talk and not just, destroy buildings with a whisper and all that.
Yeah, Black Bolt has kind of the same issue that Rogue has, in the fact that having his powers is sort of torturous for him in a way. On the one hand, it makes him very powerful and intimidating as the king of Inhumans, but on the other, it limits things that he can do. If he makes any kind of verbal sound at all, it's destructive in power. Much like Rogue has a very powerful set of things, but she can't touch anybody. So when you take the powers away, it's almost like a relief from torture, similar to Cyclops with his eye blasts.
Yeah, and the other part that I will add real quick with this, because it was so sweet seeing that, and even Al Ewing in the writing of the book, he had said, this is Medusa had said, this is sweet. We can actually talk with you responding back and not me having to interpret looks and all that. But there was in the Charles Soule run on Uncanny Inhumans, there was this little mini story arc that they did with an Inhuman called Ahura, where her kids, Celeste and Tristel, gathered the memories essentially of all of these people who knew her, and they all thought, oh, she's just trying, or they're trying to cope and have stuff to remember her by. Well, then they had the Inhuman reader, who anything he reads he can make real. He read this all out to make another version of her, and in that you see her thought bubbles where she's saying she can hear him, because one of her powers is that she could hear really well. But with this, it got so, because everyone's like, oh, it's like she could hear my heartbeat and stuff like that. So now her powers are she can hear their heart, her hearing so good that she could hear everyone's heart beating and stuff. But she could hear him, with his mouth closed, doing the talking thing in his throat, like doing a really quiet whisper. I don't think it could be destructive, but I'm like, that's amazing, that you could get that in depth. But like I said, with the Inhumans, they're doing a big setup with this, setting up for Royals and then Black Bolts, and I forget there's a third book. But one of the things that they had in here is they had the trial of Maximus, because he did all this stuff to start out. The coming of Marvel Boy, and so much other stuff like that. And then I actually really think you would like X-Men Prime, because it's all Kitty Pryde. I mean, and there's nice walk down memory lane here with her. They return to, or her Storm brings her to the X Mansion, which is in limbo right now, and Storm wants her to lead the X-Men. And so Kitty's like, okay, well, hold on, let me think about it. And is it okay if I walk around the mansion? She goes to her room. Well, who's living in her old room? Peter. Colossus is living in there, and they got relationships stuff with them. And you go throughout this whole thing and you're learning about all these people, really, again, because if you've already read this stuff, but through the eyes of Kitty, which is great because she hadn't been involved with them in so long, because she'd been in space, doing the nasty with Peter Quill until they broke up. And
Kitty Pryde's got Peters all over the place, because she's always had a relationship with Colossus. Then in Excalibur, Warren Ellis hooked her up with Pete Wisdom, and then in the Ultimate Universe, she dated Peter Parker. And now she's been hitting it up in the space continuum with Peter Quill. It's fair to say, and
she
Kitty
has
Pryde,
a type, and that type is Peter.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. If you were in the monkeys, sorry, Mickey Dolans, it's going to be Peter Tork. It's just that's just how it is with Kitty. Man, one of my favorite characters. I mean, of all comics, my two favorite characters are Kitty Pryde and Dick Grayson.
Yeah,
and certainly when you go back to when Joss Whedon was writing the X-Men, when he did Astonishing X-Men, Kitty Pryde was the introductory character. Kitty Pryde was the eyes that we saw the story through, and I think that makes sense. She was introduced as a 13-year-old when she first got her powers, and was Sprite way back in the X-Men and Uncanny, and I think like 150 something. She was introduced to be like the young character for people to kind of feel like I've just been introduced to the team. That later got replaced by Jubilee, and then more characters kind of filled that role throughout time. Sprite did for a while. Not Sprite. What was the other one? The winged girl. I don't know. There was a bunch of different ones that have happened, but Pixie, yes. With I think they also gave her Ileana's soul sword or something, which was something that Kitty had for a long time. It's just like, God, fucking let her be her own fucking character. But yeah, Kitty is realistically, she's been a part of the X-Men for her whole adult life, and has been trained by some of the very best. She spent time being trained by Logan. She spent time being trained by Aurora. She's been trained by Scott and by the Professor. So she has the ins and outs, and she knows and has relationships with all these people. She's a very solid choice. Plus, one of the things that we've always talked about, how the X-Men are an allegory for racism and discrimination. And Kitty Pryde always kind of dual identified because she's also Jewish, and she's dealt with discrimination being of Jewish descent. A lot of great storylines, some of the character over the years. It's no wonder that she's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, although I will say that even though I'm not big on the Inhumans and have never really been a huge fan of them, nothing against them, Al Ewing writing the Royals series is intriguing, because out of everybody who's working at Marvel as writers right now, Ewing is the one who seems to me to kind of be kicking ass and not getting huge numbers, but it seems like the stuff that he writes is just really cool and fun.
Well, okay, yeah. So to mention that, to go off with that, one of my favorite issues that he did, he's writing US Avengers right now, which he was doing the book before that, which it was
the Ultimates.
Well, no, he's also doing Ultimates, but there was a book that US Avengers came out of, and that was it was New Avengers. His run in there with Robert DaCosta, buying AIM and making them, Avengers initiative, whatever, idea mechanics, whatever AIM normally stands for. But he did a tie-in, quote unquote tie-in issue with Monsters Unleashed, the event series that they did that just introduced a new Inhuman called Kid Kaiju. And in there, he did it like it was, and it's a standard 24-page issue. And he did the whole thing like it was mini comic books, with the to be continued. Like you get through reading like 3 pages, and it has to be continued in ... Turn the page, it's the cover for the next issue, going from the characters, and I'm like, this is so brilliant. Like, it's just so great. It was the last issue of Inhumans, I believe, or not Inhumans, US Avengers, I believe US Avengers number 3, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, that guy, again, I'm not really into the comics right now, but that is a guy that I feel like he's going to get a lot of my attention when maybe I'll subscribe to the Marvel Unlimited app at some point and start catching up on all his work, because he's got a lot of stuff that has been very enticing. And when I hear people talk about him, it never seems to be a bad thing to say about him, other than the fact that his books don't sell in the numbers that you would expect from bigger name creators, but I don't think it's a quality that's holding it back.
He's easily the hardest working man in Marvel writing right now.
Well, he sounds like he's having a lot of fun. You know, he sounds like he's doing a lot of stuff that is exciting in an old school kind of Marvel way. And I think Guggenheim is trying to bring some of that old school back with the X-Men as well.
Yeah, and Guggenheim's done that, which is so weird since he writes for the Flash on DCCW.
Yeah, but he's sort of agnostic as to which company he wants to work for, because he's probably like us. He's read both companies all his life, and he's had his favorites of either one, and he's just excited, like, I get to write the X-Men, and I get to write the Flash. How fucking cool is my life?
Definitely.
Cool, Mark. Why do you got to rub it in our faces? Why you got to be that way?
Really, Mark? Why do you got to be that way? Let us
give me a fucking job, man. Give me. I'll fucking get your coffee. I'll give you oral.
Damn it! I was gonna get his coffee.
Well, then you can do the oral pleasure.
No, I'll let you do that part. But no, I mean, honestly, I mean, these are setting up for stuff that is so good. And honestly, you know, be checking out, if you are watching this or listening to this later, be checking out Galactic Radio, because I will have my picks throughout the coming weeks. And they're sure to include, actually, I know this week is going to include Royals #1. But, you know, there will be other things that will be involved there. You know, other new comings from Marvel and stuff. But that's enough about me. Corey, I hear a funny thing happened on Adult Swim.
Yeah, and funny in the sense of, like, I had no idea what the hell was going on. So it's Saturday nights are usually when I will prep for Podcast of Terror, because we normally record on Sundays. But this week we had to move it to Monday because Matt is selling and buying houses. Matt's got some shit going on with his life. So, and thank you to my ElseNerds pals for being willing to move the show to Tuesday for me. But Saturday night, I was like, all right, I got free TV time. I don't want to throw anything on that I'm going to take too seriously. Reruns of Rick and Morty are going over on the Adult Swim. I will pop that on. And it was a season 2 episode. It was, I think, episode 3 from season 2. And I'm watching it and I'm like, God damn, I don't remember any of this shit. And I'm pretty sure I've seen all the episodes. I'm like, oh, this is fucking weird. And so I'm like, okay, it must be one that slipped through the cracks. I'm also trying to figure out time-wise where this lands with other stuff, because it's like it ends with some shit going down, and I'm like, this doesn't feel right for where the last season, and certainly not for episode 3 of the last season, because the end of this episode, it seems like episode 4 is going to be like completely different from anything that I've seen as well. And then episode 4 is supposed to play right after it, and I start watching, and it's the beginning of the same episode. I'm like, some shit's going down. And I figured out pretty fast, because I hadn't caught the first episode of the same fucking show. From the beginning, I came in like 5 minutes in, enjoying the lovely stylings of Nathan Fillion as one of the aliens on there. And I realized, oh shit, this is the 3rd season. They're playing the first episode of Why does nobody know about this? Apparently the internet knew. The internet had blown the fuck up.
The internet, no, here's the weird part about that. The internet had known, but like I'd seen like, you know, Philip DeFranco, he had posted that no one clicked on his link because they thought it was an April Fool's joke.
Right.
So at first it was like everyone like,
and it is. It's an April Fool's joke because, one, if you think the hour after these things are playing that you're going to suddenly see Family Guy and American Dad reruns, nuh-uh, you're getting 4 hours of fucking Rick and Morty of this one episode done over and over again. Let me also say, from a advertising standpoint, some also weird shit. One is Samsung has their new Galaxy S8 commercial out. Yeah. They have one commercial which is kind of lengthy, which is, we are the makers of shit. You tell us you can't make something, and we're fucking making it. And it's a cool commercial. Then they have this other shorter commercial that is just basically the outline of the phone and shit happening that's like in the phone but outside the phone because the phone is edgeless, and it's like your world has now been expanded because this edgeless screen. And that commercial, those two in particular, but that commercial with the phone edgeless 15-second thing plays 4 times in a row. Variations of it, like one's with fish, one is with some shark and a guy swimming. One I think is probably just cum shots. I don't know, but it was like, God damn it, they played the fuck out of these Samsung commercials, except when they were playing the other commercials. And I'm going to talk about the commercials as much as I'm talking about the show because that's how much I fucking saw these commercials. The other set of commercials they were doing all night were the Carl's Jr. / Hardee's commercials, where they've introduced Chip Eston as Carl Hardee Sr., coming in and whooping his kid's ass and saying, all these fucking commercials you've been doing for the last 10 years with supermodels in bikinis eating our burgers, that's all bullshit. We're getting back down to the basics of the food. Now, this commercial plays like a fucking music video because it's 5 minutes long. And they play a shorter version of a couple of times too. But essentially, again, these are the commercials we're getting the whole time. Samsung commercials, Carl's Jr. with Carl Sr. now commercials, over and over again every break. And it's a lot. Now, I appreciate them basically saying, oh, we're gonna do all the advertising for your new Rick and Morty's and everything. It's kind of funny to me, though, because one of the big things about the Rick and Morty episode is his unending quest to bring back a special sauce for Chicken McNuggets, a Szechuan sauce that was only made in 1998, relating to the Mulan Disney movie that had come out at that time. And it was only out for a short time, and it's all he wants is his fucking sauce back. So in the show that Carl's Jr.'s is advertising on, they also did the Rick and Morty Carl's Jr. ad, which is fun. But in this show, they pretty much put a whole bunch of shit into McDonald's for a show that was advertised almost semi-exclusively by Carl's Jr. And McDonald's shit has been blowing up ever since this episode. Because everyone's like, yeah, you should bring back the Szechuan sauce. Like, most of us don't even remember that shit existed. Or we've now imagined that we remember it, much like we remember the Shazam movie starring Sinbad, where he was a genie that never fucking existed. Except they did an April Fool's joke about that too, and it kind of does now. Anyway, Rick and Morty. Really good episode. Really great to have the show back. Really great way to follow up on where they left off in the last season. Last season ended dark. It ended at a dark place. It ended in a bad place for Rick. It ended with a bad place for the family. So knowing the context is important when you're watching this episode. Don't miss the first 5 minutes because it kind of breaks it down for you going in. But it does it all right. I mean, it's consistently the great show that it continues to be. And it gets pretty crazy throughout. And I don't want to spoil it for people. I think you can still see it on the internet, maybe. And I hope you can. If not, it's going to be on in a few weeks when they bring the new season out completely. But goddamn, the show is genius. And I also have to say that I listen to the Harmontown podcast quite a bit. My podcast habits pretty heavily feature My Favorite Murder and Harmontown, which are both on the same network, Feral Audio. Slumber Party is another one that I listen to that's actually got me into that network, but they're not doing a lot right now because Georgia Hardstark is so occupied with My Favorite Murder and doing tours and stuff for it right now. But it amazes me because the guy who does the voice for both Rick and Morty sounds exactly like Dan Harmon. It is crazy. Justin had been on another podcast on Feral Audio last week, I think. And in the bit, he does Rick's voice and he does Morty's voice. But when he does Rick's voice, it's like, I was just listening to Dan Harmon 5 seconds ago. That's fucking Dan Harmon, but it's not. He's doing an impersonation of Dan Harmon to a fucking T. And Dan Harmon's in the goddamn room helping make the show, and also does one of the other voices for the show. So it's fucking weird and mildly annoying.
Yeah.
It just messes with my brain a little bit. Messes with it just a tad.
Yeah. So this is where I get to tell you my plans for Thursday have evolved and changed a little bit. If not Thursday, then Sunday, because I am, I don't know where I left off exactly, but I am still a little bit behind on season 2 of Rick and Morty.
God damn.
I know. It is just, it's this weird thing. Like, I just like, it slips my mind and I'm like, all right, I'll catch it when I can catch it. And then this, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. I still got like maybe 5 or less episodes to watch. And I know I'm a bad person, but yeah.
No, you're not a bad person. It's one of those things like Rick and Morty for me started out like, okay, so this is what we're gonna have instead of Community now, and I'll have to deal with it. And at first I didn't get it, and the belching really kind of freaked me out and like made me uncomfortable a lot. Yeah, because it's like being on here with you. It's the wet belching. It's the wet vomity belch that gets to me, and he does it a lot. He does it a lot.
I can't, because there will be vomit in one of those things eventually.
Absolutely. It just sounds like I've had GERDs. It's painful. Because I feel connected. But the first episode of the show was okay. The second episode was genius, and I'm like, holy shit. I think the second episode might have been the one where the dogs take over, and I'm like, holy fuck, this is great. And it was easily up there with things like the I don't know, the Halloween episode of Community, or when they had the pillow fort versus the blanket fort, like that kind of shit. It's like this level of thought process is just holy shit. And then the next episode was okay again. I'm like, okay, so it's going to be consistent. But then the next episode was fucking genius again. I'm like, and it got stronger as it went along. It's not like it was that inconsistent. It became more and more consistently amazing. And the second season was just all throughout. I can't think of a throwaway episode from the second season. Although I felt like for a second there that I was watching an episode that I must have seen before, and I couldn't remember why I couldn't remember it.
Yeah.
This was such an amazing comeback for the show. Such an amazing payoff for the end of the season 2, where things had gotten left. And it is like, you hate when the show's not on. You hate that you have all these huge spaces in between. We feel like that one with Sherlock. I used to feel that way with you about Doctor Who until Doctor Who was like not good. But like this show is again, it's one of those things like, I can't wait for this to come back, but I'm just grateful that we get what we get, because it's just so genius when it's happening. Venture Brothers is another one. Like, Venture Brothers comes back once every 3 years or something, like, holy shit, fucking Venture Brothers is the greatest show on earth. And then it's gone again. And it kind of like, it touches you in the morning and walks away. 2 snaps and a circle. I just fucking die watching this. I just think it's so good. And I could not be happier. Yeah. I hope Dan Harmon talks about it on the next Harmontown.
About how much you could just die and
I just want him to reach out and cut my balls and just know that they are spent.
All right, well, that is going to do it for the ElseViews, and we will be right back.